You're listening to the Real Talk Real Estate Show with your host, Clayton Hepler.
Today's guest is Dylan Marma. His business and real estate experience extends from going out to San Diego when he was in 2015, when he was just starting real estate, to become the youngest director of sales in one of the nation's premier real estate investing education companies, to moving to Tennessee to help Rand Partners in acquiring over 1,000 units as their director of acquisitions and investor relations. Dylan Marma is making a real impact on the real estate community. So please help me in welcoming Dylan Marma to the Real Talk Real Estate Investing Podcast. Dylan, thank you so much for joining us. Give our listeners a little bit of context on you, kind of where you started your journey in real estate and kind of what you focus on now.
Well, thanks for having me, Clayton. It's great to be on the show here. Excited for this episode. As far as my start in real estate goes, I would say, like many, the first book I picked up on real estate was Rich Dad Poor Dad. I think half of real estate investors can probably say that or something along these lines these days. Made a huge impact on me. But the time I read that, I was really just getting into business and entrepreneurship as a whole. But when I really set foot into real estate was when I was 20 years old. I moved from New York to San Diego, and I knew I wanted to get into some form of real estate investing. At the time, I really knew single family, wholesaling, rehabbing, and that was what I was seeking out. And I ended up landing a job with a real estate investment education company out of San Diego that taught single family, wholesaling, rehabbing, and whatnot. And they also actively invested throughout the country. So I ended up taking a job there. I ended up working in sales. And I ended up doing that for 3 years, worked into a sales manager position at a young age, was the youngest sales manager there. And I learned a ton. I really looked at those 3 years as really a chance for me I looked at it like a paid education largely, right? Because I was able to surround myself with a lot of investors. I was able to see what the different sectors of real estate looked like, whether it's residential or commercial or industrial versus multifamily and so on. And I was able to just figure out what my path was. And after long enough, I hit a point where I realized I needed to get out there and really get in the game. I had, a few single families at the time, but not all that much besides just the education capital that I'd built up and a little bit of, real capital that I'd set aside to go out and start the business, and moved out to Atlanta at the beginning of last year. And since then, I've been involved with multifamily syndications. I've personally worked on 6 different transactions. I've done 3 non-syndications, 3 syndications, and totaling, I think it's somewhere a little over 600 units.
A little over 600 units. So I wanted to kind of take a step back in your transition from where you were to California. You mentioned in the past that you had been learning about entrepreneurship and learning about mindset. Could you give us a little bit of a peek into what was going through your mind, and maybe some context of the resources, books, or things that you explored to make such a leap early in your career, being 20 years old and moving across the country? That's a lot.
So as far as mindset goes, I always try to look at things, and as far as who I was at the time when I made the decision, and also with who I am now, what lens would I make decisions through now, and would I still make the same decision, right? And I think there's some decisions I would say yes to, some decisions I give myself credit to, and some I'd say no to, right? I think we're all like that, right? I think you always see things differently when you're looking backwards. But I think early on for me, moving across the country was largely just a result of me wanting to create this lifestyle by design thing and really just go for it. I don't think I, up to that point in my life, had put the pedal to the metal to the degree that I did in that sense. I felt it was a time for me to move across the country, not in a negative way, but almost to isolate myself from life as I knew it and the people as I knew it, to put myself into a new environment that I saw creating a great life for myself, to be able to surround myself with new people and have to go out there and venture in a foreign city on the exact opposite side of the country and have to recreate myself, recreate my circle, recreate my job and business, and doing that, I think was a great thing. I think especially for folks that are young, moving out and just establishing yourself somewhere else can do wonders. It can be one of the greatest personal growth steps or leaps that you make. I really value that. Now I've done it three times. I lived in 4 states in 4 years at one point. So now I'm a little sick of it, but I'm willing to do what it takes. Right. And I think that's the end story. But I think the first time, maybe even the second time, I felt it was a great thing. And then I think eventually you want to plant your roots and stick with a location to grow your network and your relationships, because it is tough to pick up and move around that frequently. But again, you have to follow the opportunity. You have to make sacrifices. So it's doing what you see fit.
So you've established your roots, and you've aided in the acquisition of over 200 units, multifamily units. Can you tell us maybe a little bit more deep dive into what you do now, and in a very particular context? I want to understand, Dylan, what's your kind of unfair advantage in how you go about being so young and helping in this acquiring of 600 units?
So I think it's a tough question to answer as far as what's truly unfair, because what I do is something that anyone else could do, really, right? I don't think it's largely a result of some abnormal skill set or anything like that. I think it's just a matter of just putting the time in and sticking with it, and probably shutting out and saying no to a lot of other opportunities that come across until the one thing I'm really focused on works out, right? So I think that to answer your question, though, what specifically do I do now? So when I moved out to Atlanta, as I mentioned, I had started out there, and I was out there putting a lot of offers in at it's still a hot point in the market, but at being the new guy without a ton of resources, I put a lot of offers in, faced a lot of rejection. I'm still facing a lot of rejection, by the way. That never really goes away. But I was trying to grow myself, grow the business, similar to what I think you're probably going through in some ways, launching the podcast and expanding your network, right? I think that, and it's such a great thing to do. I was trying to meet everyone I could. I met more people in 3 months in Atlanta than I did in 3 years in San Diego because of how much active networking I was doing. So I started a meetup group. We did a paid live event. We called it Atlanta Multifamily. We had 100 people out there. We had Jake and Gino. We had Vinny Chopra. We had Neil Bawa. We had a bunch of just awesome guys who came out and joined me in that event, and just had an awesome audience there. Just really enjoyed the weekend. So I was doing what I could to, similar to yourself, to set up a platform to allow other people to get around multifamily and get familiar with it. Because I knew from the beginning I was not the expert at the time. I was trying to learn from the folks around me as much as I could, and also provide a platform to be able to allow other people to get introduced to the folks out there. So that was a really great experience. During that time, I bought my first 21 units. Actually ended up being in upstate New York, near where I went to school, and that worked out. It's been a good deal ever since. Been very happy about that one, but I think that was a great step to sort of get in the game, if you will. And from there, I was really eager to launch the syndication side of the business. And I was in contact with my current partners, Jake and Gino, because I had initially back out in San Diego been in contact with Gino, and a good friend of mine actually ended up going to work for Gino. That's Josh, who moved out to St. Augustine from San Diego. And one day, Josh and I took a trip up to visit Jake, and we were all just talking about what they've been doing in the business. I was talking about the syndication business and all the foundational work that I was building for myself. And then at that point, we were out on the lake one day in Tennessee River, and we had a good day of wakeboarding, and that one thing led to the next, and we decided that we wanted to go into launching the syndication business together and beginning to open up the doors for outside investors. So a little bit of context for those that are listening that are not familiar with Jake and Gino, they have a large podcast, large audience. I would imagine a few of your listeners will also be a part of the overall community there. But, for those aren't, Jake and Gino started a business back in 2013 with a buy and hold, buy, fix, refi, and hold model with their own capital, in addition to our other partner. And they had grown that business to about 900 units as of the beginning of last year. So they've done a phenomenal job. They built a great foundation. And not only did they do these acquisitions, but Jake also built and led Brand Property Management, which is still, managing all of our assets to date. And they built a, giant community and great systems and infrastructure in place to lead the management. So we're fully vertically integrated. And that was the value that I was bringing, was just the know-how on the syndication side of things, and also the additional bandwidth to be able to add value and spend the additional time working with the investors, working with the attorneys, working with the lenders, helping us get into acquisitions and outside markets and whatnot. So that was that. And since then, we haven't really looked back. It's been an awesome run. Again, I'm super grateful. So I guess if there's an unfair advantage, it's the advantage that, I was able to surround myself with the right people and partner with the right guys to grow the business. Because, for me, I had the time. I was eager. I was ready to do whatever it takes to learn anything, I needed to learn to grow this thing. And they had a foundation in place, and they had, strategic guidance and the know-how on a lot of the property aspects that I wasn't as familiar with. So I think we all brought something unique to the table. I think we still do. And I think that kind of dynamic is extremely valuable. Even just as far as the partnership goes, we're all very different age groups, right? We vary by nearly 30 years, right? Roughly 30 years. And we have an array of different, ages and different perspectives. We're all actually from upstate New York, so we're not from all different areas, but we all have a different lens that we view things through. And to me, I think that if you're looking at partnering with people, looking at partners that you're actually going to work with long term is extremely valuable, because you get to know each other, you get to kind of know how each other work. And I think that having thoughtful discussions, thoughtful disagreements, thoughtful collaboration, right? I think those kind of experiences allow you as a company to grow much better. I think that's why, even if you look at the startup industry to date, it's not just one CEO that gets glorified anymore, right? I think that having a team of people that can have skill sets and ways of thinking that complement each other make a world of difference. So that's that.
So I want to go in the same vein as that. In your kind of position as a director of acquisitions and investor relations and everything like that,
yep.
There's a lot of motion in real estate investing, and I could speak from personal experience.
Sure.
You want to move the ball forward, but you're concerned about maybe how your logo looks, or maybe it's your business cards, or maybe XYZ. What are the highest impact activities maybe that you could speak to in terms of the acquisition side, investor relations side of the business? Maybe top 2, 3 that you would say spend that 80% of your time into to yield a really successful, quick result.
Yeah. So this one, good question. And this is something I think about often, because I'm definitely an efficiency guy. I like to cut out the fat on a lot of different processes and just really narrow down to the things that are going to be truly revenue producing for us, or they're going to really move the needle forward. And I think when you're looking at this kind of a business, it's very simple. It is, when I was starting, I was acquisitions and investor relations, because really those are the two biggest, we call them revenue generating or items that you need, right? You're doing a lot of things, right? You cannot ever drop the ball of your asset management, your business management, some of the processes that have to take place in the background. As you get busier and as you start doing more deals, those things actually start to suck up a lot of time, right? And it's very important time well spent, right? I'm someone that is eager to make our systems incredible, right? So it's hard not to get lost in that stuff sometimes. But at the end of the day, you have to always remind yourself that the two best things you can be doing as an active investor are either connecting with potential past investors or finding deals. That's it, right? So sourcing deals, I believe underwriting deals and connecting with brokers and walking deals is the absolute number one most important time well spent, because the deals are the hardest part. We are in a position right now in the market cycle that we have a surplus of capital and a shortage of deals. So looking at deals is always the most important thing that you could possibly be doing with your time. I don't think you should ever lose sight of it. I think one thing that for people that are just in the earlier stages of starting their business should realize is that in the early stages, you have an incredible amount of time to look at an incredible amount of deals. So you feel like you might be at a disadvantage because you don't have the experience, but you also don't have all these other things that you're juggling that could distract you from actually doubling down and looking at a ton of deals. So just something to think about, a different shift in perspective, but looking at deals is the most important. And then as far as that with investors go, we do a lot of every day. I know, just before this call, I was just getting off of an investor call, but I do a lot of Zoom calls and phone calls with investors, and just like to build nice relationships with the guys, because it's not really a sale. It's really a long-term relationship that we're looking for with investors. We want to get to know people. We want them to, if they want to wait on the sidelines for a few years, just patiently and watch us, we're all for that, right? There's no urgency for us to push someone to invest. Like I said, it's not like that's really where we don't need additional investors. Well, we do need them. We don't need them now. And we're, right now, if anything, we need more deals. So we're just always slowly building that in the background and doing what we can to just add as much value to enough people so we can work together in the future.
So I was on a call and with Brian Burke last evening, and he was talking. He was telling me about I think that a lot of times that sending the postcard to the broker or to the 250 unit apartment building and sending the LinkedIn message is not that's not a way to get to advance yourself. It's talking to brokers. It's sourcing deals, and it's talking to investors. It's very simple. So I think that that's important, but being able to kind of maybe have that mental model of what's the Pareto Principle, if you're familiar, I'm sure you are, in this case.
Right.
So let's on the same length, maybe we have there are a couple of investors actually listen to this podcast that are experienced, that have a couple of deals under their belt. What are the biggest wastes of time? And let's maybe, cut out a little bit of the fat already. We're not surfing the internet or doing that. Wheel spinning type of things. Could you speak to that a little bit?
So as you progress in your business, the things you should be spending your time on will change. Oh. And I think you need to be very aware as to what point in your business growth cycle you're at to determine what the biggest wastes of time are. And my thoughts can definitely differ from others out there, because some people are able to pull things off that maybe I just haven't figured out how we do it all at once. But I think right now where we are as a team, we're still very nimble. We're all pretty much actively working on the business each week, and in all different ways. And right now I find that while there's a lot of, I became very aware of the amount of time I spend just being more, going to conferences, for instance, if I go to a lot of conferences, I think that actually can take away from the time I actually spend on the business. I think, it's for me, I try to go to places where I can create leverage, right? I like the idea of jumping on podcasts. I like the idea of, next week I'm going out to Nikolai Ray's event, which is the MRX event. I definitely, encourage anyone to take a look at it. And, we're going to be speaking, Gino and I are going to be speaking on stage there. And, then we have NMHC in January. But the amount of events that I could go to is endless, right? And I constantly am seeing them come up. And I used to be more of the event junkie, several years ago. But now I personally love just being able to wake up and have an entire week where I can just get up, get to work on my laptop, work on my phone, and really leave when I have a deal to go see, right? And I think that just being able to keep myself without any crazy travel plans and things like that on my schedule, and being able to just kind of stay nimble and be able to, act when it's needed, I think can give a bit of an edge. But I also think that maybe there's probably another progression beyond where I am in business right now. I know guys that are there that have a bigger team than we do, and now they have systems automated. So the best spent use of their time is going to conferences again, right? Maybe it switches, right? I'm not sure about that. I think everyone's got a different viewpoint on the value and things like that. But I think that there probably is, right, where you probably get back to where, okay, I have everything dialed in, everything automated, and there's really no need for me to be in the day-to-day thick of it. I can go to the conference and then check in on the deals that we're looking at and things like that in the evening, right? So, but that's just something that I've picked up on lately.
So there are a lot of people that speak to the fact that, your association is extremely important in being around people and working for people in positions that you aspire to be in, is integral in growing your own personal development and in brand. Speak a little bit to the kind of the Dylan Marma brand within, you have these two incredible men in the whole community around you. Are you actively looking for deals on your own, or are you focusing exclusively on building the Jake and Gino brand and the Rand Capital empire?
Yeah. So I really have my hands involved with both Rand Partners and Rand Capital. I consider more of my active job, if you will, more in Rand Partners, because that's where I play, like we mentioned, investor relations, acquisitions, and so on. But I also do a bit on leading up Rand Capital, which is the loan brokerage. We do, it's an advisory firm where we, help with mostly debt, but also equity, and we're looking at different advisory services we can offer through that. But that's pretty much where it's been the day to day. My focus is really to build up those two brands and to grow the system. I'm huge into systems. I've really been trying to put myself in a position where I can be a successful systems engineer, if you will, and trying to dial in with the project management stuff, what the day-to-day stuff needs to look like. We've been doing all kinds of improving our systems with our daily meetings. We do Monday meetings with all of the family of companies together. So we have the education company, we have the investing company, we have the property management company, we have the debt and advisory company. We also have a charity arm, right? We have a number of companies that will meet each Monday, and then throughout the week we'll get more into our little silos a bit and start to collaborate and see what's going on in the day-to-day of each business. Then we'll do some one-on-ones with the folks that are with the different divisions, and then we'll do more of like group team meetings once a week with each one. So we do that. Plus we have different functions on different ways we're managing the business and things to that effect that we'll go through each month. So it's a mix, but right now, I mean, for me, I really am not. I'm not really someone that's eager to just to get myself out there a ton in the public eye. It's not that I really don't mind it. I actually enjoy public speaking, but I'm not really as focused on building up a personal brand or inspiring the world through my social media right now. Maybe there's going to come a time where that's my vision, but right now I want to grow things as they are.
I love that. And that speaks to, I'm sure you are familiar with Cal Newport and building up career capital.
Big fan.
Building up that career capital is again, it's integral in leveraging that label. Later. It sounds like you're really about, leveraging those systems, personal systems, because we're all our own business and being able to have that, oh my gosh, I learned so much here and I added so much value here that I can leverage that later. That's incredible. So speaking of that, tell us a little bit about kind of your journey in learning about your thinking about systems and how do you think about them? How do you process them? Is there any books maybe that you could, or ways of looking at a business that you could share with us?
Yeah, of course. Well, I'm glad you brought up Cal Newport. Definitely a huge fan of deep work and just a lot of his teachings. I think he's awesome. Encourage most people to go through that one. And just, I think it definitely challenges the way most people look at productivity and working and things like that. As far as books go, I'm always when it comes to systems and building an org and things like that, I always have to bring up Principles by Ray Dalio. That's my favorite book. You got it? Love it. Yeah. I've been through that. It's, it's almost it sounds a little crazy to say, but I've probably been through that a dozen times or so. And, I've taken so much. I've studied it and I really believe so strongly in a lot of the message that it takes, and tried to actively write out my own principles and question the ones that are in the book and develop my own sort of strategy. And that's when I really want to embody within our culture over time, because I love the idea of creating the idea meritocracy and having thoughtful disagreement amongst the group, and having it not be a water cooler gossiping environment, but having it be more of this, taking ego out of the picture, and having it be an environment where we all can shoot each other straight and be open with each other, radical transparency, radical open-mindedness, things like that, right? I think all of that together is just a formula for success. So huge on that one. And then lastly, I know I touched on some of those meetings on Mondays and things like that. We actually just had coaches come in last week, beginning of last week, Monday and Tuesday. We meet with them on a quarterly basis from this organization called Petra. And Petra is a group that teaches the Scaling Up principles. It's Scaling Up by Vern Harch. And Scaling Up is basically version 2.0 of the Rockefeller principles, which are basically the principles that Rockefeller used to grow and scale a large organization. And that's what they focus on, is helping you take your organization from more of an infancy growth stage to being a mature company, and the things that every large organization should be focused on. So really enjoyed that, and definitely would encourage anyone to take a look at that one.
Wow. That's so deep work principles and scaling up. Is that an appropriate read for someone maybe that is just starting their real estate business?
I really think you can go without it at that point. It's tough, right? Because if you're anything like me, I'm a big reader, big learner, and I always like to see the other side and visualize it. So being able to go through something like that makes me think about, even though I'm here today and I'm grinding it out today, this is what I could be going through. And I want to make sure it's something that I want to put myself through, right? You may read the book and say, I want no part of this, and I want to stay small, right? And stay as a one-man show. It's whatever your decision is. But I would say, for most people, it's not like you have to do it. I think really the best thing, if you're really starting out, just keep underwriting deals, keep putting out there, walking deals, and just learn as much as you can, and connect with as many people as possible. Call everyone you possibly can. Yeah.
I think that's a big, it's a big thing that I've learned throughout this, this conversation. One last thing before we jump into our fire round, you have spoken about in the past about kind of managing efficiencies in properties. And I know that's a big thing about, RAM properties, is that, how to look at a property and speak to the efficiencies and how to make it more efficient, especially in how overpriced a lot of deals are now. Could you just quickly run through, just share a couple of the knowledge about, you mentioned something about sure bonds and security deposits and things like that. I just want to give a little bit of context, because you guys really provide incredible service to your residents.
Awesome. Yeah, happy to. So when you're looking at a deal, we talk about there's two ways to make money on a deal, really, right? There's two ways to create value, and it's to increase the income or decrease the expenses. And oftentimes when we say managing inefficiencies, you're talking about decreasing the expenses or finding ways to provide more quality customer service across the board. Jake's big mantra with our property management team is that we are striving to be the Chick-fil-A of property management, right? We want to create safe, clean, affordable, quality places to live that people enjoy and get world-class customer service in. So that's one thing that we definitely put a strong focus on, is teaching quality property management. And also it comes from who you're bringing into the organization. So we actually like to recruit from high-end restaurants and steakhouses and places where people are already ingrained with this customer service aptitude. So I think that goes a long way, and that will speak to the customer service side of things. Then I mentioned the other two ways that you can create value on a property: increasing the income and decreasing the expenses. It's important to think about, because decreasing the expenses really is only going to go so far. You can only get so slim on the expenses before you're under managing the property or you're not putting enough back into it and the place goes bad. So I never try to make a deal out of just decreasing the expenses. It doesn't happen that much in our industry. It definitely happens in different areas in private equity or whatever it might be, right? But I find that there's only so much value on average. There's definitely extreme cases, but there's only so much value. Some things that are common is that we've often reduced marketing costs, right? There's a lot of paper marketing and old school marketing techniques that aren't really that effective. So we've been able to reduce those. We've negotiated a lot of our contract services. So trash is always a big one, right? Just from making some phone calls and negotiating trash, we've been able to save several $1,000s a month on some properties. Then when it comes to payroll, sometimes they are overstaffed. But again, this is one to be careful with because you don't want to make a deal out of being just staffing a little bit tighter, because sometimes you need that extra help. And sometimes someone falls off and you have turnover costs within the employees, right? So you just want to be aware that that's not always a way to make a deal, but sometimes it's just obvious that they're being well overstaffed and things like that. Sometimes there's water leaks, but you want to go and really go ahead and verify that, things like that. So hopefully that gives you a better feel for what I mean with inefficiencies. But the majority of the property, the value that you're going to bring on a property is always from driving the income. And something that could be considered inefficient would be the fact that the entire market is used to having a RUBS system, which is a ratio utility billing system, implemented across the properties where the residents are paying for their pro rata share of utilities. And when you're able to implement a RUBS system that wasn't in place before, you're creating an additional income stream for you as an owner, which is going to, number one, make people be more thoughtful about leaving the shower on for too long and running the water and things like that. So people will probably spend less as a whole with utilities, and two, you're also recouping a lot of that expense across the board. And then there's all different ways you can create additional income streams or bring units up to market rents, things like that.
Excellent. So let's jump into the real talk fire round. All right. What's your number one real estate investing book?
Real estate investing book, I would say Peter Linneman's Risks and Opportunities. It's a big textbook. It was actually gifted to me by a developer out of Brooklyn that I had the chance to sit down with a few years ago. That was definitely inspiring to me during the start of my journey, and picked up that one. It was definitely the thickest, one of the tougher reads I've been through, but it gives you a good historical perspective on the markets and the way interest rates work and the way opportunity and risk all plays against each other. So I think if you're ready for it, I think that's definitely a really neat one.
And any the kind of business books outside of principles or mindset books? I know you're an avid reader.
Well, I have to give a shout out to The Honeybee, Jake and Gino's new book that just got launched. So make sure to pick that one up.
The Honeybee, absolutely. That's right. So, Dylan, what were some of your limiting beliefs, maybe, or some that you had in moving, and how can we learn from your ability to get through them?
Mm-hmm. So I think the biggest thing that I went through, which is something that you still always go through as an investor, is that you set goals that you want X amount of acquisitions, or this is where you want to go. And I think that with where we are in the market cycle, I think we all battle to some degree with this limiting belief, is that we're at a really high point in the cycle and there's no deals out there. Now, part of that is true. We are at a really high point in the cycle, right? But the second part of it is very subjective, and I don't think it's true, right? I think there's always deals out there. You just need to know where to look, and you need to be buying smarter than ever. And the way that we push ourselves through that, and maybe I'm speaking to myself a little bit here, because we're actively hunting. It's been over 130 deals that we've looked at since our last deal was under contract, right? So we're actively hunting and pushing through it. But the way that you have to view it is that those that can find quality deals and execute quality deals during this time period, number one, are building the patience that you need to be successful as an investor, right? The most successful investors in the world, they're not guys that are just shooting from the hip at everything that pops in front of them, right? They're ones that are setting realistic expectations and being thoughtful and being patient during high points, right? And then getting aggressive during low points, right? That's just the nature of it. And I think the other thing is that for executing quality deals right now, it's taking an extra level of being savvy to truly perform, right? We don't know what the future holds. People thought we were at the top of the market several years ago, so I'm sure people were probably saying the same thing then. But I think that the key is that you're really making sure the deal works, and you're not basing it on having the market save your ass, right? A lot of the times, if you're in a great market and you're buying at a great rate, that the market could just carry you all the way to the finish line, and there's a huge margin for error. I would say there's less of a margin for error if the market doesn't keep going up, which very few people think it's going to keep going up like this forever. So I think it's a smaller margin for error that we're playing with, which makes us have to really be more thoughtful. And I think that we're all more sophisticated than ever before. So investors are looking at unique ways to create value and drive value and structure deals that they weren't looking at many years ago. Right? Many years ago, just what's the going in cap rate or cash on cash. But now we're looking at what's the 5-year timeline and what different ways can we add value and see things differently than the next guy.
So that was an incredible answer. Along the same line, what drives you, Dylan, to keep investing, keep pushing, keep learning, keep growing?
I love the business. I love building the business, and I am a continuous learner. The reason that I left my last position to put myself in this position is because at one point I felt like a trained monkey. And I mean that by the fact that I felt like I was just a robot, just doing the same things on repeat. I had cut down a lot of the learning curve, and there's only so much more to go. I love the fact that real estate and business as a whole is stimulating enough to constantly be learning something, constantly be growing in different areas. And I think for me, I value more than anything the experience that I'm getting and the person I'm becoming, and the even the challenges, right? When I run into challenges, when we run into positions where you're having setbacks and things go wrong, or you have people issues, whatever it might be, I think there's the most valuable learning lessons from those kind of experiences. So I think just taking that and looking at it all as a positive just allows me to just keep enjoying what I do.
Mm-hmm. So what's your real talk best habit that you employ on maybe a day-to-day basis that keeps you being successful?
Reading. I would say reading is my number one best. Big into reading, big into meditation. I try to keep going to the gym and a lot of the other basic stuff that I'd say a lot of us probably squeeze into our day-to-day schedules. But I would say that if you were to drop all the habits and put me in a box where I could only do one habit, I think that would be the one. I think that would be the one, because I think that's the one that makes the biggest difference. I think it helps expand your mind and just open up new ideas and just keeps me excited.
Before I ask my last question, where can our guests find you?
Yep, you can go to find me. I'm online it's either at Dylan Marma or Dylan Marma on most social media platforms. You can also find us. It's randcre.com. Randcre.com will link you to the whole family of the companies, and basically back to the landing page where you can see everything that we're doing currently. And you can also email me, Dylan, DYLAN, at randcre.com.
Excellent. What was your biggest challenge in real estate, and what have you learned from it?
It's the whole idea. I want to say it's Winston Churchill. It could be completely wrong, but it's the whole idea of being just as enthusiastic on door number 1,000 as you were on door number 1. You know if that's right?
I don't know if Winston Churchill invested in real estate. He seems like a pretty smart guy, though. Yeah. So being just as enthusiastic.
I think he would if he was here.
Yeah, he definitely would. So that's just keeping with it, right? Keep having that persistence that you're going to get rejected. There's going to be tough times. Things are going to go wrong, and just keeping that enthusiasm and keeping
keeping clear on your goals and where you're heading is definitely the most important.
Excellent. Dylan, thank you so much for your time this evening. I'm sure my listeners will all be thanking you as well. I appreciate it. And I am excited to see where you and your contribution in the past, I guess it would be a couple of years that ran with 600 units. I can't imagine in a down market what you guys are going to be grabbing up.
I look forward to it, fingers crossed.
Excellent. Thanks again.
Thanks a lot, Clayton. Appreciate having me on the show.